This morning on This Week, hitting the polls.
I don't think people can wait to vote.
As Americans cast their ballots, the faces behind those votes is changing. The minority vote and the majority who use it. Plus, no party people.
But over here, you have to fight for those no party people.
We'll be watching the counties that surround the Quad Cities this election. What makes those voters so different than the ones in Scott and Rock Island counties? And the serious skin pain that mysteriously hits women as they age.
It's almost like when your skin feels too tight after sunburn.
But it can advance from there. How this woman was able to get out of taking more than 70 pills a day. It's your health. This week.
You're watching News 8 This Week with Jim Mertens.
And voting has begun across America, but just who is voting? More and more are minorities. Whites made up 76% of the vote in 2000. That fell to 67% 2 years ago. And that can change elections. The latest Pew Research poll shows President Donald Trump had a 7-point lead among white registered voters over former Vice President Joe Biden at the start of October. But fewer than 1 in 10 blacks support the president in the poll. 29% of Hispanics support the president, and even fewer Asians said they would. But will minorities turn out to vote between now and Election Day? That's been the big question in recent elections, and it's our top story this morning on News 8 This Week. Time and again, we're being told to brace ourselves for a record-setting election turnout.
We were being told last December in D.C. to anticipate a higher early voting population this year because it was going to be a very engaged election.
And the face of these voters will be different from past elections. Pew Research looked into the growth of minority voters over the past 20 years. It found the greatest growth is among Hispanic voters, almost a 40% increase. That's more than 15 million new Hispanic votes since 2000. Compare that to just under 7 million new black voters over the past 20 years. And don't stereotype the minority vote either.
I'd say it's no different than what anybody else wants. Well, we want better economic opportunities. We want better education. We want a police system that works for everybody. These are the same issues that everybody wants.
But the racial makeup of Midwest voters is leaving an impact in Iowa and especially in Illinois. There are now 500,000 more Hispanic voters in Illinois than 20 years ago. 12% of all voters in Illinois are Hispanic. Iowa has 52,000 more Hispanic voters and now make up 3% of the electorate.
Republicans shouldn't sort of alienate and write off the Latino vote. At the same time, Democrats shouldn't take the Latino vote for granted.
The League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, was active in its effort to get Hispanics to the caucuses in Iowa back in February and the Iowa and Illinois primaries this spring, and are involved in the Get Out the Vote campaign right now. And joining us from the LULAC chapter based in Moline is Daisy Moran. Daisy, thanks so much for joining us. I mean, this is really crunch time. A little more than 2 weeks. How are you going to get people out to vote?
Yes, so we have been active in our community. Recently we had a community cleanup event in the Floreciente neighborhood, which is in downtown Moline, where we had tables for census information and voter registration. We also have 8 voter registration deputies in our organization actively in their inner circles trying to get people registered to vote. And also we have an active campaign on social media encouraging our peers and community to vote early.
Well, and as I said, I mean, you've been active all year long when it came to the primaries early on. Is the Latino bloc, and I know it's not just one massive group of voters that just vote one way, but are they fired up about this election?
Many individuals in the Latino community may feel intimidated by the election process. This may be their first time voting, so they are barely starting their education on how to research for the people on the ballot, how to research early voting, and how to make sure that their vote is secure.
Intimidation, of course, would be that you feel uncomfortable going to a voting precinct. I would assume that it's less intimidating if you're asking for an absentee, a mail-in ballot, and filling it from home.
Yes, correct. And along with that, there also may be a language barrier. So many of these families, they may be solely speaking one language, or they have a bicultural family where it's first-generation immigrants along with their offsprings as the translator in their family and helping educate their older relatives and their families.
Well, and as we have seen, we are seeing a larger number and a bigger percentage of the voting bloc being Latino, Hispanic voters. But they're not just one voting group. I mean, there are Republicans, there are Democrats. Democrats should not take them for granted, and Republicans shouldn't write them off, is what our political scientist said.
Yes, and I would agree to that both parties have not given the proper attention to the Latino community and asking what are the pressing issues that we care about. So it's important that organizations such as LULAC have that internal mobilizing and organizing our own communities to ensure that everybody is at the poll, because each voice needs to be heard.
And what is the big issue then? I mean, for the longest time, at least for the last 5 years, if not, of course, far longer than that, was the issue of immigration. But right now, in the area of COVID-19, the Black and the Hispanic population was hardest hit. What seems to be the big issue then this year?
Yes, definitely. As you know, the COVID pandemic has increased and exposed the inequalities that we currently have in our society. And one of those main issues, as you said, is immigration, along with mental health. Latina teenagers are the largest rate of suicide compared to any demographic. So I think those are the pressing issues we need to talk about, why we don't have adequate resources and equity across the board, and how we can ensure that we have accurate representation at all levels of leadership in our cities and in communities.
And as we were saying, I mean, COVID-19 has really hit the Hispanic community.
Yes, and I believe one of the reasons that the Hispanic community has been hit the hardest is because the Hispanic community is one of the largest individuals in the frontline services. So you'll see more communities of color being at-risk jobs versus other counterparts that have the luxury of working from home. And also, like we've stated before, the language barrier and adequate education, knowing that COVID should be taken serious and the precautions that need to be taken place.
Well, and as you said, that the turnout for a Hispanic vote is usually lower, and it might be a language issue. How do you overcome that? I mean, how do you turn that around?
So one of the things that we need to prioritize is ensuring that our county clerks have materials translated in the most spoken languages, and also ensuring that we have voter deputies that are bilingual, not just in Spanish, but other languages spoken in the Quad Cities.
And let's talk about another issue, and that is 2020. The Hispanic community in the Quad Cities is thriving in so many different ways. You look at Mercado on 5th in Moline, where it's an open market that's becoming bigger and bigger. The Quad City Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is growing as well. Viva Quad Cities has been a successful fundraising arm. 2020 has really hit those areas significantly.
Yes, in many ethnic groups, just like the Hispanic community, it's all about coming together as a community, whether that's physically or in virtually, as we have accommodated to COVID. So it definitely has taken a toll on the Latino community for us not to come together and heal.
When it comes to politics, we're seeing more Hispanics getting involved in running for office. I mean, is that something that LULAC is actively participating in trying to not only get out the vote, but get out the candidates?
Yes, our organization LULAC is a leadership and empowerment organization, so we definitely try to encourage our members to be out there and be the leaders that we need in these spaces, and provide those leadership skill development opportunities.
So what do you see for after this election, after November? I mean, the voting block will be there. What happens with LULAC after that?
We're still going to be advocating for our local elections and ensuring that our communities stay educated on how to be civic engaged, and also, as stated before, encouraging our peers to be out there and go try to be leaders in the spaces of leadership.
People are saying this is the most pivotal election they've seen in a while. Do you agree with that?
I think it's true to an extent. However, no matter the outcome, I believe that our communities will come together and only encourage us and empower us to be those leaders in the spaces that are needed. So regardless of the results of the election, I believe this will only push underserved communities to be those leaders that we need.
All right, and thank you, Daisy Moran from the LULAC Council 5285 in Moline. Later on this week, a stroll through the woods without leaving your home. In our finishing touch, join us as we take a quick fall tour through Loud Thunder Forest Preserve, and you don't even need to bring a coat this morning. But first, a fast fact on this week. There's actually a statewide Iowa ballot question voters face right now. Shall there be a convention to revise the Constitution and propose amendment or amendments to the same? Well, it's actually a question automatically put on the Iowa ballot every 10 years and has been on the ballot since the Constitution was approved in 1857. It never really goes anywhere. The last 5 Constitutional Convention questions in Iowa have been rejected. You're watching News 8 This Week.